Okay, welcome back, everybody. I am here for Conversation with Friends number 32. 32. When I started this out, I thought I'll never find enough people to have conversations with. That's a problem I'm working on. So today I am here with Casey, who has a very diverse background. And Casey, introduce yourself to the good people today.
Thank you, Dawn. I am the founder and president of CTJ Solutions. It is a consulting business focusing on helping you move from okay to outstanding in your career and to help companies identify ways to tame their conflict dragons. I have a 20+ year background in consulting and in education, where I've taught team dynamics, career goals, and also transitioning to different phases of your life. I am very pleased to hold a doctorate in leadership from SUNY Albany, and I have the Lean and Six Sigma green belts because apparently I need to know how to tell people their processes are wrong, and I'm really good at data. So if you need me, please reach out to me. I love the Capital District, but I'm also willing to travel. In fact, I've been enjoying the sunny Thousand Islands and Adirondacks in the past couple of days. And one of the points that Dawn and I were talking about beforehand is that you gotta live a creative life. You can't do the basics over and over again. So Dawn, thank you for the opportunity. And I love that we're gonna talk amongst friends.
Absolutely. Now, when we were catching up a little bit before we hit record, you were talking about how you left the K through 12 education arena. Tell me about that, because I have so many things and thoughts about our education as it is these days. What led you to leave that?
Well, I'm going to do a little self-promotion here. I have a great book called Thinking About Teaching. I'm on Amazon with it. And I wrote a chapter about why I left. So to give everybody kind of a preview of it, I had hit a wall mentally. Our school district suffered tragedies. We lost a student in Iraq. We lost a student to suicide. And we lost the parent of a student into a tragic car accident. I personally also went through a divorce, and it wasn't kind. I was alone, and I realized that I was not doing my level best. Plus, I ran into a group of people who were literally jackals. It wasn't the students, they were great. It was the other adults. And they bullied and bullied and bullied people they didn't like. In fact, Dawn, one of the scariest things I had was I literally had somebody walk up to me, hand me a bottle of scope and say, use this for your breath. That's not good supportive structuring education. That is bullying writ large. The other area I think why I left education was this. What's a test got to do with it? What does it really got to do with it? We want creative thinkers in our economy. We want entrepreneurs. We want innovators. And I know that, having taught at Rensselaer Polytechnical Institute in Inventor Studio for 5 years, I've seen what we need in the real world. And in education, what we were literally doing is taking highly trained professionals and infantilizing them, making them into babies. You know, if you get a master's degree, it means you think. If you get a bachelor's degree, it means you know how to learn. If you have these degrees, why are people handing you lesson plans? They shouldn't do that. But at the same point in time, you gotta support the folks. You have to support each other. I did not see that. And so I became really enthralled in learning how to mentor people. And now that's what I do. And I'm hoping to build it into a career to mentor people, because we waste so much talent. There's a phrase in lean management that says that there are 6 wastes that are terrible. The number 6 waste, or muda, is the waste of human potential. And Dawn, I don't know about you, and listeners, I don't know about you, but I see so many people with such great potential and talent being wasted because people put them in a box.
No,
We've
no,
got to stop.
yeah, full stop. Okay, so like my son is 32 and you talk about testing. In fifth grade, when he went through all the testing, we lived in New Hampshire at the time. And, you know, we got the results and I'm reading it and his reading and comprehension skills in fifth grade were at a 10th grade level. His math scores were off the chart. Like when he was learning his times tables, he would come home and he said, look, they have these things, you know, like the ones they teach you where it's like how to, you know, the threes, you know, and all the patterns you can find to help you learn them. He was finding patterns outside of what he was being taught. And I sat him down after the testing and I read him all this stuff and I was saying, you can be anything you want. And he goes, so I could be a doctor? I said, you can, but you don't have to be. I could be a lawyer. I said, you can, but you don't have to be. What I'm telling you is you have such a great brain that you can be whatever you want. You can go after whatever you want, but you don't have to be, right? So when he was graduating from junior high, and I'm taking his picture outside of the school sign, I said, so what do you want to be when you grow up? And he goes, I don't know, but I do know that I'm happiest when I use my brain and my hands at the same time. And I was like, that's great, right? Like, okay, you got it. At least you know that about yourself. He ended up, you know, going into auto tech because he's crazy about cars. And he found out really quickly he hated the industry. So he pivoted and did other things. The bottom line is what I taught him in all of that is you can be anything you want. Decide what you want to be, right? And I'm okay with it because it's not my life, right? And so, you know, and we have these great conversations where he talks about all the time, what is wrong with people that they don't think, right? Like, you know, that whole thing about, you know, the people that came down on him in school because he had that great brain, but he was just a boy. And by that, I mean, he just wanted to be the kid. He wasn't self-motivated to be the, oh, I'm going to, you know, be the best student of all, right? Because there's a difference. Just because you have the you could be, doesn't mean you want to be.
Right.
And, right? And I was okay as the parent to go, but you're getting great grades and that's okay with me, right? Because
because it's one type of learning. School really doesn't do all the types of learning. And, you know, Dawn, my mom and dad, Pat and Al Jakubowski out of Buffalo, said the same thing to me, to my brother, to my sister. We don't care what you do, just do your best to be productive and to be a lifelong learner. And that's something I think we've lost, and you said it. How many people we run into who don't think, who don't problem solve? We want compliance. We don't want creativity.
Right? Isn't that what our school system sets you up to be? Isn't that the whole idea behind it, full stop, like from the beginning of time, was to create people that were good with routine and following direction?
Yeah. It's the Lancaster system. It was the idea that our educational system is based on testing. It's, you know, it's ironic to me that if you look at how desperately in the world we are trying to promote creativity. There was something in Forbes yesterday or the day before, and this is late June of 2021, where it talked about, oh, yes, you can be trained to be creative. And I thought, oh, that's the anathema of creativity. You're not training people to be creative. What you do is you offer them freedom to be creative. That was the point I always saw when I taught, was people always asked for permission and not for forgiveness. And in the world today, we want people who can be creative, but we don't know why they don't have the instinct. It's because for basically 20 years, it's been beaten out of them.
Right. Yeah. Like the whole thing with math. Like I graduated high school thinking that math and my brain did not work. Right. But I found out afterwards, it wasn't that I couldn't do the math. It was I couldn't do it their way. Like I could, right? Like Because there I was with the new math, you know, it wasn't good enough that you had the right answer. You had to show your work. Well, my brain didn't work that way. I couldn't show you how my brain knew that. I couldn't put it down on paper. So I literally was beating my head against the wall thinking, oh, well, I'm just a girl, number one, right? Because that's what society tells me. Girls don't do math. That's okay. It's okay that girls don't know how to do math. So I bought right into it because, you know, your brain isn't fully formed. So you're like, okay, well, this is the way it is.
I want to give a huge shout out to 3 groups that I worked with when I was at RPI. First of all was the Society for Women in Engineering, Go SWE, and specifically Sahara Becker Cha and Elizabeth Ginji, who were presidents. I'd also like to give a huge shout out to the Women's Mentoring Program at RPI. And third was the ACMW, and that's Women in Computer Science. All 3 places really were reversing that narrative. And I got to tell you, I'm honored that I, as a white male, cisgendered, middle-aged dude, was brought in as their advisor because they thought I did a good job of helping support their voices. And they were doing some really awesome STEM days with the Scouts. They were doing Girls Can Code. And I think that one of the points that we need to realize is that you can't be competitive. You have to be collaborative. And this is something that I try to help teach businesses, is that collaboration is the name of the game, not competition. But like we talked about earlier, people need to understand the world is changing. We need to do better. If you look at where all of the productivity is coming from in the world, it's in those collaborative countries that give support to their people. It's not in this place where we squeeze them. Right now, we are using 1800s and 1900s techniques to get stuff out of people. We're literally grinding them into dust. And that's not conducive, because in a company that loses an employee to a mental health related issue or to exhaustion or burnout, Dawn, did you know it's 3 times their salary to hire a replacement?
Yep.
And, you know, I was talking with Christine Simon yesterday, one of my amazing RPI alum, and we were talking about, we've got to quantify this change, this culture change. We need to quantify for people, because we have that statistics, 3 times somebody's salary to replace them, X number of inputs, but nobody's actually talked about in data management issues an actual formula. And so Christine and I are going to work on that. We're going to create a formula so that the bean counters can go to the boards and go, whoa, if we don't do a better job on our climate and culture, we're going to lose X number of thousands of millions of dollars.
And here's the other thing about, it's not just that things need to change, things are going to change. They are. It's just a matter of whether or not people who are in a position to embrace it so that it comes sooner rather than later. It's coming, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter whether you like it, whether you think it's okay, it's coming, and it has to. It has to, right? Otherwise, we'd all still, you know, change is inevitable, or we'd still all be living in caves wearing woolly mastodon clothing.
Yeah. And, you know, Dawn, I actually have three structures to this for people who are, quote, in charge. Are you an administrator? Are you a manager? Or are you a leader? People are like, well, those are synonyms. No, they're not.
No,
they're totally different. If you're an administrator, you do something to keep the wheels in motion, but you may not necessarily do anything that's creative, innovative, or supportive. If you're a manager, you tell people what to do, but you don't have the bigger picture behind it. And you can stress them out because you come at them very toxically. Do this because I told you to. If you're a leader, what you do is you say, gang, we got a problem. Let's figure this out together. Or, hey, you know, I noticed you really snapped at that team meeting. What's going on? How can I be supportive? What is on your plate that needs to go away? What is something that maybe we need to think about? Hey, you know what? This is what I want you to do today. I need you to take a 2-hour lunch. I need you to go on an errand of your choice to do whatever you need to do. I need you to leave your phone on your desk, not think about work for 2 hours today. Or like something I did with my staff, and I'm very super proud that I did this, was I said to them, you're feeling warm, toasty, crispy, burnt out. You got to take a day off. Don't check emails. It is your nights. It is your weekends. I want you to take a day off. Well, I can't do it. I can't. Yes, you need to take a day off. And then they'd come back the next day and they'd be like, whoa, did not realize how bad I had it. Exactly.
Not how bad you had it, but it's also, we've been trained to think that we can't miss an email, that we can't miss a phone call, that and really they're just emails, people. If something was so badly burning that it was needed that much time to take care of it, phone calls would have been made. It wouldn't be an email.
Well, and I also feel, Dawn, this is a huge issue too, is their lack of planning should not result in my catastrophic emergency. And I get really upset when other parts of organizations don't know how to communicate or collaborate. I think one of the other areas was I saw something on social media that absolutely made me want to throw up. I got sick to my stomach reading it. And it was this person who claimed to be a guru. And they said, hey, you really need to think about how you're going to impact your team if you take your time off. No. That is not the person's job. That is the job of the leader to talk about, all right, we got to look at work-life balance here. If you need to take time off, you need to take time off. And if we need to rearrange priorities to support you, that's what we'll do. If it becomes an abusive habit, that's a different point. But, people should not feel like they're letting their teammates down if they take a day off. That to me is improper planning by management or by administrators. It's just like when I go to a fast food place, I felt so bad. I went to a place that I run on coffee-wise, and they were down to 2 people. And they said, well, they only scheduled 4 people for today. And one of them called out and the other one's running late because their car broke down. Well, to me, that's an intentional underscheduling of resources. And that to me is an anathema, because then you're burning out your other people because you're not thinking.
Right. And tell me about so you went to higher education.
I did.
And you found that there were the same walls, or were there different walls that you were bumping up against?
I would say there were different walls, partially because higher education, just like K-12, suddenly became run like a business as opposed to a service. And here's what I mean by that. So when I went into higher ed as an adjunct, I was severely and profoundly underpaid. I was making $2,500 a course. I was literally teaching at 5 different institutions to make a base salary of $30,000. I had to do it for the healthcare because we don't have a universal healthcare system. And one of the points that I saw was, as an educator, it didn't matter that we were some of the most talented and credentialed people in the world. We were treated like interchangeable widgets.
So let me go back. It's just seeping through my brain. You were working at 5 different colleges, whatever, yep. Right? 1 course at each?
Some places it was 2 or 3.
So tell me, what did a day like that, what did a day look like for you? Like how many places did you have to drive to?
It depended. Some days I was lucky and I only had to go to 1 place, and I taught 3 times that day or 4 times that day. Other places I would start out at 7 o'clock, drive almost an hour one way, teach a class, drive an hour back. grab something, you know, from a fast food joint and go to a different college, teach for an hour, and then drive to a third college and teach for a third hour.
So, and you're getting basically like $2,500 per class per
Yep.
semester.
Yep. Yep.
I want everybody to think about that for a moment, because how much are kids paying to show up in that class?
Well, yeah. And, you know, the fact of the matter is that a lot of institutions of higher education, they do good things for certain groups, right? Now, if you were to look at what a college professor makes, who's a full tenured professor, they make a decent wage and they do good work. But the way the college subsidizes that is by hiring adjuncts. And they hire a lot of administrators to do paperwork or to do planning, or, you know, and I think that, you know, we also got to realize that folks who provide direct support to students are often the lowest paid people on the campus.
Right.
For a long time, the only way that residence hall directors could make a living wage was their housing was subsidized. And they were essentially year-round camp counselors for students. But we have a lot of problems where also, what you said, the students are paying a lot of money. The government has really, in the United States, stopped funding education correctly. If you look at the world, the number of university positions has exploded because they want the intellectual brain power. You know, they're creating universities. Poland, Ireland, Africa, specifically in Kenya, South Africa, India, they are creating universities because they want the talent. Whereas in the United States, we're cutting universities. You know, we're also, what we're doing is we are really forcing students to put themselves into very precarious positions by those student loans.
Oh my God.
Because
it's crazy. It is crazy.
Yeah.
They're walking away with the amount of debt that, you know, you could buy
a house,
2 homes sometimes,
yep.
Depending.
Yep.
I mean, that's just, yep. I don't understand how is that long-term helping anyone?
It's helping the folks who are the stockholders in the bank, and it's helping the uber wealthy. And, you know, the idea that they bullied the president into backing off of forgiving student loans because, well, I paid mine. Well, you know, this whole thing about, you know, I feel that we've lost civility, and I feel
absolutely, because like, how many people have died of cancer? Like, how many people are dying of cancer today? So if they found a cure for cancer tomorrow, we can't bring those people back to life. Will we feel sad about it? Sure. But I mean, I don't understand that whole thing. I paid off my student loans. And I had an only child that I raised, and I made sure he didn't have to have student loans.
Yeah. Well,
right?
think about COVID-19. We've lost 600,000 people in just a year. You know, for a quote unquote first world country, we had a building collapse the other day in Miami, where the structural deficits have been known for almost a decade. We have the ability as a country to do moonshots, you know, and this is one of the areas that I think has become horrific, is they've created in society, the wealthy, a Hunger Games approach, where they say, oh, you want a piddly little bit of money? Compete against 90 other people.
There was a gentleman who did an interview a couple of days ago, and he said, infrastructure, roads and bridges are a woman's problem because they are out there doing the shopping. I was like, oh, okay, women are out there shopping. We're the only people using roads and bridges. Where do you think your food comes from? Like, how does it get from point A to point B? School buses full of children and commuters who, you know, I was like.
Rapid transit.
The bubble that you live in, sir.
Yeah, rapid transit is a poor person's problem. No, it's not. That is an abject, utter lie. Same thing with clean air, clean water. You know, I got to tell you, I think I became an empathetic person because of some stories that have happened in my life, not only having to move into higher education or move into K-12 or now founding my own business, because I run into people who don't value empathy, who don't value individuals. But, you know, I had a best friend in high school, Rick Schaus, who died from problems with his heart. And this really, really resounds with me, Dawn, because in my own life, my younger brother Adam died because a company put profits over people. So Ricky died. Adam, my brother, died because of greed. And, you know, it scares me today where we have people throughout the world who get on the air, on the media, and they say, it doesn't matter, that person doesn't deserve X or Y. Well, you know, minimum wage, healthcare, access to clean water, access to good food. Why are these things that should be limited to somebody who quote unquote made it? Because realistically, you know, a lot of us, we've had stumbles. One of my best mentors has lost 3 companies, has been unemployed 4 times in his life. He's got a PhD in nuclear engineering. How in the hell do we do that?
Yeah.
Well, it's because of greed, you know. And I tell you, Dawn, one of the things that I'm always going to fall back on, and I will always go to the heart and soul, is that you got to treat people right, and you got to treat them with dignity, and you have to help where you can help. You know, there was a study that was done where a guy gave homeless people $100 and thought they were going to blow it. They didn't. Instead, what they did was they gave almost all of it to their friend, and they bought food, and they bought a better tent at one of the superstores for somebody who needed a new tent. And the guy was shocked. He was shocked. But, you know, I wasn't shocked, because at the end of the day, I believe in the power of people.
Right.
But I believe what happened is we have a Hunger Games scenario going on, where what we do is we pit everybody against each other.
And it's a myth that they feed everyone, right? That, you know, it's all this, the brown and black people are taking your jobs. That's why white people are poor. No, white people are poor. White people can be poor just like everybody else. You know, that's not, white people aren't poor because black and brown people have taken your jobs. And, you know, like, come back to healthcare, right? And who's deserving? There are people who don't have healthcare who die of the same diseases that other people breeze through because they have all the support of the health system at, you know, they can pick and choose all of it. They can pick and choose where they get treated. They can choose all the best treatments. And that's not true of all of us. And how is that okay, right? I don't think empathy is learned, by the way. I think we're born with empathy. And I think some of us are better at holding on to it than others. I think the world makes you choose.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Can I just say, you know, it's so funny. Somebody was asking me recently, because of the holidays, about Charles Dickens' classic, A Christmas Carol. Charles Dickens wrote that book to shame the wealthy into doing something to help the poor in London. And the results were world moving. Not only did Charles Dickens create a classic, but they also saw an increase in giving to charity of 1,000% after that book was published. They shamed the churches into providing more than just a thin broth for foods. They created an environment where people began to have a moment of reaction towards the wealthy who are hoarding. And that, I think, Dawn, is what I see a lot of people hoarding.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. Like how much, like I think about that all the time, like how the people at the very tippity top who are holding on for dear life, not giving away on anything, right? As far as, and I think to myself, how much money does one person need, right? Like how, honestly, like they're, and generational wealth, I think, is a horrible thing. I think it creates really shitty people when you're,
it does.
you never, ever, ever have to want for anything or
Right.
work for anything.
Well, and let's face it, up until the 1980s, most Americans, when they passed away, if they had moderate means, they could pass something to their descendants. Now it's eaten up by nursing homes and lawyers.
Correct.
And so the entire situation has changed, where unless you are savvy and have created situations where the only people making out are those who are doing the work that really is robbing generations of the wealth that should be given to them.
Right, because in 1950, right, we like to make fun of that whole era because mom stayed home, but they could stay home. Everybody had a car. Some people had 2 cars. Everybody had a house, and one person had a job. Now,
right, because
wages. Right. Now we have both parents working, sometimes multiple jobs, and they are working paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah.
And
Did you know how much it costs to live in the Capital District? I just heard this. It cost one parent and one child $49,000 a year to live a okay lifestyle in the Capital District.
That's now today?
That is today. That is as of Tuesday last week when I was listening to the radio on a drive.
Okay, so to make $50,000 a year take home to live that okay life, how much does one have to be being paid an hour? Do we know that?
Well, so if we look at it, it's getting close to $30 to $50 an hour.
And how many people are making that?
Not many. And not only that, but you said it, take home, right?
Right.
Because that's the thing. Everybody is like, oh, you know, what's the average? Did you know in New York State, upstate, the average family income is $32,000 a year?
Yes.
Family income,
right?
Not one person, family.
Right.
That's scary.
It is very scary because boil that down to how much they're making an hour. And we're still being told the myth that we cannot raise minimum wage. And yet everything else goes up. Cost of food goes up. Cost of cars go up. The cost of apartments, the cost of houses, the cost of healthcare, all of that goes up. How can we not raise minimum wage?
Well, and it's funny you mentioned that because I was looking at what a first-year teacher makes in New York State. So there are some places where the starting salary for a first-year teacher who has a master's degree is $41,000 a year. If you look at the per hour compensation, if a person worked at a fast food joint making $20 an hour and they were given all of their hours, yeah, they'd be making more take-home pay than a teacher would. However, what the teacher has that the fast food worker doesn't have are the things like healthcare and a retirement.
The union, the pension.
Right. And, for a lot of time, a lot of people think unions get in the way of a lot of stuff. Unions are really handcuffed in a lot of ways because, there are times when the administration gets rid of a very good person and the union's response is, I am so sorry, we can't do a thing for you.
But also, let's go back and talk about how many hours a teacher actually works.
Correct. And it's this thing where everybody's like, oh, they've got their summer freeze. No, they don't. For a lot of teachers, especially early on in their careers, they have to work over the summer. And a lot of times they're waitressing or because it is a pink collar job. Very, very large numbers of women go into it. They do things like they work at state parks, or they work at amusement parks, or they work in booksellers, or they get a job in a fast food place. You know, so it's also exhausting because during the year, you know, in America, we are the only country in the world where the majority, and by and far, it's like 85% of the teacher's time is in front of pupils. Japan, Germany, Norway, Finland, all those other places that people are like, well, why are they doing so much better than we are? Well, A, they skew the data because they don't test everybody. We do. And B, the average amount of time a teacher is in front of pupil is only 50% of their time. What's the difference? It's the difference that politicians who don't know what they're talking about keep talking about efficiency. They keep talking about efficiency. They keep talking about getting every squeezing ounce of dollar out of a dollar because it's public money. Well, if it was truly public money, then why are there major corporations in the United States who had record-breaking profit years who provided no local, state, or government taxes federally? Well, they're lawyers. Well, no. They're cheating because they want employees trained by school systems to be perfect when they walk in the door because they don't want to train them. But back when my grandparents were growing up, you could start as an 8th grade educated person on the railroad and be the only person in the family working, own a home, raise 5 children, and live on a retirement. That has gone away. We shouldn't be talking about poor workers. We shouldn't be saying, oh, I'm so sorry, restaurant worker, you can't hire people. Minimum wage for a tipped worker is $2 an hour.
Yes, sir.
Do better.
Yeah. Well, let's just talk about, you know, recent history. COVID, the last year, everybody who had money made tons more money, right? And yet the rest of us lost jobs, lost wages. Almost 3 million women left the workforce. 3 million women. They didn't,
Dawn, they didn't leave, they were forced out.
Either way, right? Because women will make the choice to take care of the house, the children.
Right. And that's a force out because of the structure.
Right. And we are at now early 1980s numbers of women in the workforce. And we are going to have to fight for everything as we come back into the workforce. We're going to have to fight all over again. And we didn't leave having pay equity yet. So yeah, and now they're going to use that against women as they try to come back into the workforce. Hey, push came to shove and you left. You're high risk for us.
And it's really interesting when you look at that, because I think it should be illegal to ask, why'd you leave your previous job? I think that should be an illegal question. I think it should be illegal to, if somebody has the qualifications, the training on their resumes, I think it should be illegal to ask about workplace or gaps in the resume. Because here's what I think happens, and I've seen this way too much on hiring committees, is that I always looked for the best qualified person. I didn't care if they had gaps on their resume. I didn't care if they were tossed out, because I have seen enough nonsense, bullcrap, bully bosses out there to know that a lot of times people leave not under their own volition, or something happens tragically and they don't want to talk about it. And it's none of my business as a supervisor. I've also been on the other side where I've been interviewed, and you know, they've got this Goldilocks problem. They want, oh, that person's too hot. Oh, that person's too cold. They want just right, or they're consistently saying, oh, you know, we need somebody who's better at this or better than that or whatever. Well, you know, that's shirking responsibility for taking the really great resources that you have and letting them fly free. You know,
right. Well, yeah, no, it's lazy. It's lazy is what it is. It's not looking at the person and figuring out what their strengths are and what that can mean to your organization, right? I can remember, and you know, you talk about it should be wrong to ask why you left your last job. When I was a single mom, I was working at an insurance agency and my son was in junior high and he had never had trouble with his grades, and all of a sudden now he's struggling. And when I sat down with him and tried to figure out what was happening, he finally said, well, why should I care about my grades? Dad doesn't. Dad doesn't care. Why should I care? So he was having, you know, really emotional issues with the, you know, his father who was not at home anymore, et cetera, et cetera. And all I saw was, ooh, I need to do something about this. I am in the position to do something about this. I walked in and gave my notice the next day, and my boss looked at me across his desk and said, you can't afford to leave. And I looked at him and I said, I can't afford not to.
Yeah.
I will do whatever it takes to take care of us. I will do whatever it takes, but I'm going to be home for my kid, because 10 years from now, I do not want to look back and go, oh, I should have, could have, would have.
Yep.
Like, how did he have he had no right to tell me what I can and cannot do in my life. Number one, I am an autonomous adult, right? Like, and he started throwing out there all these things like, but I saw you, Linda's not going to be here, you know, very much. She's going to retire. And I saw you as somebody who could, and yet you waited till today to tell me. You have not been putting me in a position to know that that could be my destiny should I want to choose it. You have not been putting me in positions to better myself now. How would I even imagine that? And I thought, like, what is that?
Well, and, you know, I think that this is also a huge issue where you bring up, Dawn, with the idea of a conflict dragon. And for me, this is an area where people make promises that they don't intend to keep.
Right.
And I have seen this over and over and over again, where really talented people get abused by an institution. And then when they say, hey, whatever happened to, oh, we can't do it, the quarter wasn't as great as we wanted to, or the money's tight, or, well, we can give you a title bump, but we can't give you a pay bump. Right. Meanwhile, they're on their third yacht going to their fifth island and having, you know, shrimp and lobster cocktail parties. You know, and people are going to be like, oh my God, you sound like Bernie from Vermont. Well, no, I don't sound like Bernie from Vermont. I believe that for all the people who say that they're religious, they need to think back to the founder of Christianity. And they need to talk about the same thing with Buddhism and Hinduism. And all of the religions across the world have always challenged people who abuse others and accumulate wealth. And the phrase was this: it is easier for a poor person to enter heaven than for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle. And I think that this is really important because, and I'm sorry, I didn't finish it. Something about it. It is easier for a poor person to enter heaven, and it is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to get to heaven. That's the phrase. And I think that this is something that we need to think about, is that all across everywhere where everybody talks about, you know, oh, you know, they want to be Christian, they want to be, you know, polite, they want to do whatever. Well, dang it, your actions better speak louder than words. You know, it's so interesting to me that right now that 4 of the wealthiest people in the world are driving to get to Mars.
Yeah.
But the amount of money that could fall out of their pocket in one day could feed every single poor, hungry child for the rest of their life, could end poverty as we know it. You know, I've driven by all these vacant buildings. I've driven by all these farmhouses that have fallen down. I've driven by communities where you look at what's there and you realize that there are so many people who are stuck because the elite have mined the wealth out of our entire country. And, you know, it's really funny that it took a pandemic and a rebellion, in a way, by a lot of our local leaders to finally get the governor of New York to put a 1% tax on the billionaires.
Right.
And, you know, they talk about the fact that if they were to tax the folks just 10% of what they reaped during COVID-19, they would still be the top richest people in the world.
Right.
But we could fix our roads, we could fix our sewers, we could fix our waters, we could improve our schools. Dawn, I don't know if you know this, but one of the scariest things in the world I saw was when I worked in a large urban district. This was the lunch they served, or this was the food they served kids who were in poverty. For breakfast, they gave them chocolate milk and sugared cereal and candied fruit, essentially. It was, you know, Gushers. It wasn't even real fruit. They finally got real fruit on the tray, but they wouldn't give the kids what they wanted. They said, no, today's apple day, you're going to take an apple. Today's banana day, you're going to take a banana. So then for lunch, they gave them 2 slices of Wonder Bread, a slice of American processed cheese, and a slice of processed ham, some sort of carb, usually some sort of carby salad, and a fruit and a milk. And they were wondering why the kids got sick. They were wondering why the kids were tired all the time.
Can we just make a parallel to this? Because that's still the kind of food you get in the hospital.
Yeah.
It's carb on top of carb on top of carb, carb on top of carb. And it drives me absolutely crazy. So crazy, like so crazy.
Yeah. Yep. And when asked, the directive was keep it cheap. You know, why? Well, you know, ladies and gentlemen, I think one of the areas you need to think about is that in a lot of school districts, the director of the food program gets to keep any profit that is made off of the food program budget for the year. So some of these folks are making $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 because they're serving the cheapest food possible, so that they can do that on their salaries.
Let's just go back to how we're raised, because like I grew up poor, right? And as a kid, you don't know you're poor until you're old enough to notice how other people live, right? You had food to eat, you had a roof over your head, you had clothes. It's not until you have the awareness that you look around and you go, oh, they're not the best clothes, and oh, our house is kind of whatever. But I can remember that I was maybe 6 or 7. I grew up in Albany. I was maybe 6 or 7. And at Thanksgiving, my mother went out shopping and she got these cardboard boxes and she filled them with a turkey and stuffing mix and all these things for a Thanksgiving dinner. Not the best foods, you know, canned cranberry, whatever. The same kind of Thanksgiving we were eating, by the way. And she'd do 2 or 3 of these. And we went to church. We went to St. Paul's by the park. And so she knew who was lacking in our church. And I went with her and she would go up to these families' houses and she would put the box by the door and she'd knock or ring the bell. First of all, she had me waiting around the corner somewhere.
Yep.
She would do that and run back to me so that they didn't know and didn't have to feel shame of who helped them. Now, the message to me, though, was that you could help people, right? Mm-hmm. So even when I had the awareness of how much we didn't have, I also had that to counteract that with, it doesn't matter how much you have, you can still help somebody who has less than you. So let's take this all the way back full circle about generational wealth. What are the lessons taught? Well, not a lot of them, right? Well, there are lessons, but their lessons aren't like that. The lessons are get as much as you can, get more, get more, get more. Where some of us have lessons and we've learned by example that you can do more. Doesn't matter how much you have, you can still do more for somebody else.
Yep. You know, Carnegie, Vanderbilt, Rockefeller, all those titans and barons, the one thing that they had that our current elite wealth don't have, except for those that have signed the giving pledge and are giving away their fortunes, is that they believed that they were responsible to help those who worked for them. They may have worked these people very hard, but they also endowed theater, and they endowed libraries and schools and scholarships, and they provided money so that people could attend higher education.
Took care of them
free.
if they got sick.
Yes.
Paid those bills for them.
Yeah, it didn't happen all the time. It
Right.
did happen a bit. But you know, your story about giving away the turkeys, I totally get it. I totally hear, because one of the most humbling moments you ever have is when you have to say, after having lived in different life, asking for help. You know, watching your parents cry because they can't save your little brother, because the doctor is refusing to perform a surgery because he wants to be paid, even though he lives in a McMansion and goes to Key West for 6 weeks every year. Or watching, you know, like filing for unemployment. Why did you get dismissed? I don't know. They just told me they didn't need me anymore. Or when you realize that there are people out there who have negotiated because people think they've got the skills, these multi-million-dollar contracts, when in reality, they're driving the companies into the ground and putting hundreds of people out of a job that have nowhere else to turn. You know, I drove through the community of Ilion, and there's an author, her name's Demetria Dukos, who wrote a book called Worked Over, that talked about how the Remington Arms Company, after it left the Remington family, just basically extracted everything from those two buildings through threats. Well, they have gotten everything, and yet they are now shutting down the plant. And they are basically creating an environment of waste in Mohawk and Ilion. You know, there is no more, I believe, truly, Dawn, a sense of civility anymore or civics anymore. Because if you're a multi-billion-dollar industry located across the globe, what does it mean to be local? It doesn't.
Right.
And, you know, we talk about entrepreneurs, and we talk about how local businesses create 70% of the jobs in most communities. It's impossible for them because nobody locally will take a moment on them. My entrepreneurial friend who has lost his company multiple times, he's like, people will meet with you, they'll talk to you, they'll promise you the moon, and then when it's time to follow up, they're not there for you. And you're like, well, what happened? Oh, well, we decided to go a different way. You know, there's not this idea of local civics anymore. Scouts, Rotary, Kiwanis clubs, Key clubs, all of these civic organizations are dying because people just don't want to be bothered. I had a very dear friend of mine who is one of the most giving people I have ever known in my life. And he said to me, Casey, I'm frankly tired of being the only one in the room that gives a crap anymore. And he was talking about scouts, and he was talking about how there are 15 kids in the den with my godson, his son, and how he is the only parent that is willing to step up and lead because all the other ones are too busy. Some of them because they have to work multiple jobs, but others of them are just like, meh, I had them, but who cares? Just babysit them for a couple hours. I've called children the ultimate lawn ornament. You know, and people ask me, they're like, oh, well, how come you don't have a ton of student loans? Well, it's because my little brother died. And the insurance settlement, which lawyers had to fight over, went to help pay for college. So I got the Adam Michael Jakubowski scholarship. And, you know, my brother, Nick, got the Adam Michael Jakubowski scholarship, and so did my sister, Emily. But I would have rather have been paying back the student loans to have Adam again. And I think one of the points that we learn when you have a moment where you need to learn resiliency is that It's not about you through sheer hard work. And it's not about you because you have hubris. It's because there is an ecosystem. And when you face tragedy, you realize that there was no way to solve it because all along the line, people didn't take responsibility or accountability because they were too afraid of losing their jobs, because we've set up a system where it's okay for children to die and families to grieve and mourn. And it's okay for buildings to collapse, and it's okay for people to get sick. But it's not okay for the billionaires to have to give up 1% of their wealth.
That is a really good place to stop, sir. That was a really, like if we had written an ending to this conversation, I don't think we could have come up with a better way. However, before we say goodbye, I would like you to tell the people what kind of work you're doing and who needs to hire you.
Yeah, thank you, Dawn. CTJ Solutions Consulting. I help folks who realize they're not where they want to be in their career, and they want to get out and they want to actually earn what they're worth. They want to have dignity. I think people also who need to hire me are companies who are really serious about creating a better place to work, to live, to be. And I want companies and people to also tell their friends that I'm starting to do retreats. I'm starting to do group sessions where we can talk about not be alone in this world. We're really not alone in this world. We just have to use the technology to find each other. And I'm not calling for overthrow. What I'm calling for is an evolution. And I want people to know that I'm there and that I can see people's hearts and their souls. And I can see and hear when they tell me the scars haven't been fixed, because I live with those scars every day. And one of the points that you learn is that you've got to talk to somebody. And while I don't do counseling, I do discussion. And I believe my place is in between, where you've talked to your friends at a bar and you've complained, but you're not quite ready to get professional help. I'm in between. And the best place for you to find me is on LinkedIn, Twitter, at CaseyJ_edu. Email me. Look for me on Facebook.
We'll have all your links. If you're watching this episode, it was there with the post that you had to click on to listen to us. So all those links will be there. If for some reason you can't find them, you can find me, and I will put you in touch with Casey.
And, you know, Dawn, you and I were talking about this, and I think it would be a good idea to share with your listeners. We were talking about a networking event where in the future, you and I are going to plan one where we're going to get folks to sit down and actually get to know each other first before they go off into the unstructured abyss. Because folks, the Capital District is the 4th largest community in New York State, but the extended Capital District is the same size as San Jose. We're not acting like San Jose, folks. We're acting like 4 or 5 or 6 small separate cities.
Right, which is one of the reasons why, you know, like I grew up in Albany, we moved to Columbia County, then I went away to school and I came back 12 years ago. There is so much here. There is so much here when you really take advantage of what is the Capital District. There is so much available to us. It's like no other, you know, it's almost, I do think of it as a greater city, almost like New York City has its sections, right?
Yep.
Like, so you've got the east side, you've got the west side, you've got the villages, you've got, you know, I feel like that's what the Capital District has for us, if you look at it that way. instead of Albany versus Troy versus Schenectady versus
right.
right?
Or like, Saratoga or
correct.
Hudson or
Correct.
you know, Gloversville, Johnstown, Amsterdam, you know, Schoharie. We're not going to exclude you. Heck, Glens Falls, come play with us. You know, Pittsfield, Massachusetts, the 413 or the 802 in Vermont, come play. And I'm going to offer a special deal for July. If you if somebody wants to be a client for me, they're going to get 30 minutes for free with me if they can give me a receipt that says they've donated either to the food bank of Greater Capital District or to the Goodwill or the Salvation Army. I don't care what amount, even if it's one can or one box, I will give you 30 minutes free. That's a $50 value for just making a donation to people who are way less fortunate than we are.
Awesome. I love that. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today, Casey. I think we brought up a lot of things. And while this is not a political show, I think we touched base on pain points. If you listen and don't just hear political things, if you just listen to the pain points we were actually talking about, we're talking about people problems, right?
Right.
It's your choice whether or not you want to politicize them.
That's correct.
Put that out there, people. It's up to you how you see this, how you hear it, and how you take it in. Thank you so much for your time. We will be talking, yes, very soon. We will be back to talk to you next week, people. Take care.